Good.
No problem. Thank you for coming. I'm going to make a brief introduction, and then Milena is going to introduce you as a speaker. So welcome, everyone. Eu vou falar em português inicialmente, mas é importante todos estarem cientes de que a palestra será em inglês, conforme nós havíamos divulgado. Eu sou Débora Drucker, sou analista da Embrapa Agricultura Digital, membro da coordenação da rede Golfer Agro. Gostaria de dar as boas-vindas a todos, agradecer a sua presença. Esse é um evento promovido pela nossa rede Golfer Agro, que é coordenada pela Embrapa e também conta com a Unipampa, o FRJ, a Universidade Estadual do Rio de Janeiro e a Universidade de São Paulo como membros do comitê gestor, e o nosso palestrante vai falar por 40 minutos e depois nós vamos abrir para perguntas por 20 minutos. A gente pede que todos permaneçam com os microfones fechados. Quando a gente iniciar as perguntas, vocês já podem ir colocando pelo chat. Se desejarem fazer a pergunta por voz, também é possível. Se precisar de ajuda para tradução, a gente pode ajudar, mas, por favor, não interrompam a palestra. Está bem? A palestra está sendo gravada. Então, eu passo para você, Milena. Você está com o microfone fechado.
É bom abrir o microfone, né? Obrigada, Débora. Boa tarde a todos. Sou Milena Teles, eu estou aqui na sede da Embrapa, também faço parte da rede Golfer Agro, e eu gostaria, então, eu vou falar aqui com o Clement. Good afternoon, Clement. Welcome and thank you very much for accepting our invitation. I'll introduce you in Portuguese for the group, and then you can get started, okay? Então, pessoal, o professor Clement Jonquet é PhD em Informática, pesquisador sênior do INRAE, na unidade de pesquisa MISTEA, e pesquisador associado da Universidade de Montpellier, na França. Ele trabalha no design e desenvolvimento de repositório de ontologias, serviços baseados em ontologias e artefatos semânticos FAIR. Desde 2015, ele lidera a iniciativa Agroportal para construir um vocabulário de referência e repositório de ontologias para agronomia, ciências alimentares e vegetais. Então, uma boa palestra a todos. It's with you, Jonquet.
I think you are muted.
That's me now, huh?
Yeah.
So I visited Brazil a long time ago, and I learned one sentence: "No falo português," and of course "todo bom." So let's just hope I can probably not make a speech with all those two expressions, so I'll speak in English, and I hope everyone will be okay. Just ping me on the chat or something if you want me to repeat or slow down on something. I may have sometimes the tendency to speak probably a little fast, and so people need sometimes to call me back and say, "Oh, hold on." So be sure to do it. Let me share my screen. Should be able to do that in a minute, in 1 second here. Yes, you should be able to see the screen here, and let me see if I can put the chat somewhere. So reactions and okay. Well, okay. Okay, so yeah, thanks for the introduction, and this is my email, just in case people want to connect me. That's my email in my previous organization, LIRM, that I'm still very associated with, but I'm working at INRAE now. I've been involved in several, not several, but at least a couple of GoFair implementation network also when GoFair initiative was proposed in Europe and internationally. And we're not following much that anymore, but we had originally a group with also interest with the question related to semantics and FAIR, all of that. So the presentation that I'm going to do today will be about a tool, a methodology, and a tool that we develop in the context of the AgroPortal Semantic Artifact Catalog. Milena, I understood you briefly. You mentioned in that context, developing and sharing ontologies and vocabularies, we have developed a methodology that we call OFAIR for assessing the level of fairness. So to which level those semantic resources that we host in our catalogs are addressing the FAIR principle. So this is very much Go FAIR oriented, and this is very much also agro oriented. We'll see that everything that we have in AgroPortal is really focused on resources for our agri-food. So I think for your network, it's really could be an interesting presentation. I hope it will. So yes, I had that title that we use for the presentation a few years ago, we met also with Deborah also in the context of IGAD, and in the context of those discussions related to RDA, we had a pre-meeting at IGAD where I use a presentation and say fair data requires fair ontologies. How do we do? And so I was raising the question of, if we want to have fair data, then we have to, there is one principle that actually calls for fair vocabularies and ontologies. And so I was raising some ideas to actually show that the fact of developing semantic artifact catalog, ontology repositories will help to do that. And now I'm going to actually present you what we have done, because in those 4 years, we've produced some results, including that result OFAIR. And so I'm going to take a more, this is what we had, and this is what we've done based on what we had in the past. Let me just maybe do that. Okay. Just put the face a little bit on the side. And so, yes, so the quick introduction is really this one. The argument on the fact that metadata, that fair data requires a fair ontologies really relies on the FAIR principle that you probably know, the interoperability number 2, that says that metadata use vocabularies that follow the FAIR principle. So this is the only FAIR principle that is really recursive, asking for the FAIR principle to actually rely on other FAIR component, in this case vocabularies. The word that is used in the FAIR principle is the word vocabularies, and we'll kind of use a larger word, sometimes ontologies, and sometimes the notion of semantic artifact to englobe all of those vocabularies, terminologies, ontologies. And so the question was really, well, if we have those principles, how can we go from those high-level principles to criteria that will help us to measure, with respect something, in our case, ontologies, will respect the FAIR principles. And that was really the question raised also by this kind of study on fairness assessment. So in order to do fairness assessment, by assessment, you have that notion of measuring something, evaluating something. And so there was also a paper a few years ago, right after the FAIR principle, the same authors, some of the same authors joined and proposed a paper in Scientific Data to design a framework for metrics of fairness. The notion of metrics show up with the idea that if you want to say that you're fair, you should be able to measure that and then propose some kind of a metric to measure that aspect. So we were thinking fair assessment methods for fair data. So the way I'm going to do the presentation right now is quickly introduce AgroPortal, which is the context of the ontology repository that we are developing in the agri-food domain, that offers us a place in which we share and exchange and not standardize, but enable standard access to ontology and semantic artifact. And that was kind of giving us the context to do that fairness assessment. And I will present the tool OFAIR in the second part of the talk. So the quick introduction to AgroPortal will go like that. Well, communities knows that there are issues with ontologies, people, and I know the ontology is a term also very much used, and there is a lot of interest in the domain in Brazil. We've seen a lot of activities and workshops, so we can measure the fact that ontologies are now being developed by different communities, different formats. They come from different sources and they have different structures. That diagram shows the evolution of the numbers of ontology in BioPortal, but they are coming also with a bunch of formats. Sometimes they are in OWL, sometimes in RDF schema, sometimes in SCOS now, and they very often overlap. So you have to deal with the fact that they need to be mapped one another because they cover some multiple ontologies cover sometimes the same domain. So when you deal with ontologies and you have facing those issues, then you face that situation of that argument of explaining that developing ontology repositories, so catalogs where you'll be able to actually list and make those ontologies available, will actually make them more fair object in themselves. And that slide was produced in the previous presentation that I was mentioning in 2018, where I was like, well, we do make ontologies more fair. We make them more findable because we put them in a repository. We make them more accessible because we have APIs, a Sparkle endpoint, all of those technical means to make them accessible. They are more interoperable also because we link them together. We describe them with the same metadata schema. We link them. We represent their relations. And of course, they are more reusable because we have a bunch of metadata to describe them. And so I was really making the argument, but then our mission, our job was to say, well, you see that white space in the left corner, bottom left corner, that's the place where we think maybe if we have a fairness assessment method, we have a spot here in the UI where we want to say something about an ontology and the level of fairness. So AgroPortal it's an initiative that we started about 5-6 years ago now, with different actors from INRAE, from CIRAD in France, also from IRD and multiple CGIAR also. And we did the analysis that there was really a need to develop a place, a one-stop shop to find ontologies and vocabularies in the agri-food domain. And our model was really the BioPortal web application that exists in the biomedical domain. And so AgroPortal is really a platform that you find at agroportal.liam.fr, where you can publish, search, download, of course, and work with them locally, but also browse, visualize the content of ontologies and vocabularies. We deals with versioning, we deal with annotation, peer review, semantic annotation of text, recommendation of ontologies. We deal with those mappings. We have a mapping repository. We store also the project using the ontologies in order to show the ones that are alive, the ones that are not really used. And so really the vision was from scratch to develop a reference ontology repository. When you say reference, we mean some kind of a place where people will find their ontologies, and with a primary focus that would really be agronomy and related field, agri-food now with it. And by reusing the BioPortal technology that was developed by Stanford, a lab that I used to know very well, I used to work there with them on the BioPortal software, we wanted to re-implement what was done in the past, but also facilitate interoperability. That was the idea. And then reuse the scientific outcomes and then build on that to actually enable new science in our domain, agri-food. And so the basic functions of AgroPortal that I'm illustrating in the next slides allows you to browse and select ontologies. You'll see them, use a faceted search approach to filter them based on different metadata. You see metrics and a short description for each of them like that. So basically, you'll have a tool that helps you to browse and select the one that could be of interest for you. Because we index the content, of course, we have a service, something like what we call search, where you can actually search the content with using a string. You can say, oh, if I give you leaf area index, can you find that mention in ontologies in the portal? And you'll find it in multiple resources. And when resources relies on one another, we try to also show those like that. For example, in the agro ontology is reusing the leaf area index as being defined by the plant trait ontology. And this is an illustration that we show in that page. We also have those systems that we call widget that help someone designing an application to say, if I'm building a website or a web application and I want my data to be directly annotated with a given ontology, maybe I can start using those autocomplete widget. And if I start typing leaf area, and then I pick up leaf area index, my widget, what it does is actually already store the content that in the back of the widget, we have a URI that has been selected. So we go from the string to the URI, and by doing that, we help formalizing the data. So once you identify a concept in an ontology, here, for example, the leaf area index in the agronomy ontology, you'll see the hierarchy, you'll see the details for that. It's really an historical, very protege-like UI that shows you what you can do with this resource and the metadata and the information we have for that specific concept. And we have different visualization also that can show you also different path to root on the graph of relations behind the concept. This is a little bit outdated, but it still works it still works. We like also the idea of having community-based functionalities where people can develop, can make notes and comments related to the ontologies. They can say that an ontology is related to another one, that an ontology is being used in a project, that an ontology is mapped to another one, and we try to identify those mapping. Those community features are also important to show that an ontology project is alive, and then others can rely on it when they want to reuse ontologies. We describe ontologies with a bunch of metadata here that you see on the left side of the window, and that metadata help us to say the maximum amount of things we want to say about ontologies that we store, because we believe that saying the maximum things that we want to say will help us advertise or tell the world things about the ontology that we host, and let the community, the scientific communities and people reusing the data select the one that are appropriate because they have all of the info. And on that screenshot, you already see, for example, the FAIR score being computed, because that screenshot is illustrating that, and I'm going to come back on it right after the next presentation. We also have that thing that we call the annotator service, that for some text data, you know that very often human beings express their information as text, and so we developed that service called the annotator that for certain ontologies that you pick up will help you identify the ontology terms that are present in your text by kind of looking into the content of those ontologies, trying to match your text, and tells you, oh, your text is literally about those terms, and you can return them to the users as annotating terms. And those annotations can then be used by final users and users to actually build index and build those semantic index where they will use the semantic, the knowledge of the ontologies to actually process their data. The classical example for us is really, the tabular file with a set of threads describing here cassava, and for which using the annotator, you'll be able to go from that Excel spreadsheet with keywords and strings to a certain concept here, CO33400 something. That's the URI that you want to have in order to identify initial vigor in the appropriate ontology, and that's the URI that will help you to link back to that to the ontology defining that URI, and then make your data when you work on cassava more interoperable. We also have that service called the ontology recommender. The recommender is really something that for that given text will look into the annotation that I showed you before, but also other parameters, and tells you which ontologies, which vocabularies are relevant for the data that you give us. So if you will give us such a list of words or terms like that, or a paragraph like the one I'm illustrating in the UI, the recommender will tell you, oh, look, anaetesaurus or the width phenotype ontology or the threat ontology are actually good match for your need for your data. So it really helps also in the process of selecting ontologies. As I said, we also deal with a mapping repository. So when you browse a concept, you also always see that class mapping tabs that we have that shows you the links between your ontology and others. Those links are very generated by the portal, are very simple. They are lexical match. Sometimes we don't even call them mappings, but we can also store mappings that are explicitly defined by the user and load to the portal either through the API or through the UI. And we have different visualization, like the visualization of those mappings that I've illustrated. And so my last slide on AgroPortal is to show you that we are developing AgroPortal in the context of an alliance that is called the ONTOPortal Alliance, that we've started a few years ago with LifeWatch and, of course, BioPortal, the original developer of the technology at Stanford that you have here at the center of the domain. And for different communities, different domains, we are helping them or supporting them or working together to share a technology to develop semantic artifact catalog or ontology repositories. Also, we have already adopters in different domain, industry, materials, in addition of agri-food or ecology and biodiversity. And we have even newcomers now in the domain of earth sciences also, for example. So that vision of ONTOPortal Alliance is really to increase the ecosystem long-term operational, but also financial health in order to find the best way to support communities in the future. And that slide, you don't need to read it, but tell us that we AgroPortal are always in line with the ONTOPortal technology, but we are now developing our own features while staying backward compatible with the original technology. We develop a bunch of new features corresponding to our new needs. And the vision of that alliance is that if every group here develop new features and those features can benefit one another, then we're going to have a set of functionalities and needs that will be super useful for our communities. And one last slide with respect to AgroPortal is that slide that tells you that this is not only a web application made for human beings. This is really like a web application makes that for machine, and you can rely on our REST API on the Sparkle endpoint that store all of the data to actually bring software, build software that will actually rely and use ontologies. And all of the features that I've illustrated by the UI are available through our services or directly through the Sparkle endpoint if you know to speak Sparkle. Okay, well, that's the quick introduction of AgroPortal. I don't know if there is quick questions or reaction on this, or we can have them at the end also. I don't mind, but in case there is a burning side, give me a sign. I see. That's really the part on AgroPortal, which is kind of necessary also to understand a little bit what we did with OFAIR. So you see that in this title of that part of the presentation, I'm putting OFAIR as a methodology, an evaluator for semantic artifact or semantic resource here, or ontology. I mean, we play a little bit with those three words all the time. But then AgroPortal becomes secondary. It's the environment in which we are implementing, making OFAIR available. So OFAIR, what was the approach of that? So you remember that screenshot where I show you the metadata here for autobiotope? We were like, really, we want to be sure from those ontologies, can we assess and measure with like scores and a technique that will be useful to the final users to tell them how much we think their ontologies are following the FAIR principles. And for that, the only thing that we have at end is the metadata record describing the resource in AgroPortal. So those metadata are being taken from the ontology file when someone submits the ontology file, but they are also edited, curated by the users, and we use them to actually, we're going to use them to compute that score. So the goal was really to provide something here, and that targets things that you see moving on the slide. So we started this work by doing a little, state of the art, looking at what was happening. So I'm not going to describe that state of the art in detail, but there was a lot of things going on in 2020 around fairness assessment. That's why we call that 50 Shades of Fair, because we found it that even the UI that were developed were really innovative and coming with new ideas in order to kind of see if resources will follow the FAIR principle. So what I like in this slide is that we identified two things that are really specific to semantic resources or ontologies, and we identified 4 methods here, and things that were like not necessarily specific to semantic resources, but for sure that will be also relevant for us to look at in the process of evaluating fairness. So this is the reference for those papers that if you get access to the slide, you'll see the connection. And so the first approach that we did is we wanted to address our first requirement that is coming. The first approach that we did is we said that we're going to take those methods that are semantic artifact or semantic resource specific and the one that are not, and merge them into some kind of a methodology, what we call a fairness assessment grid, some kind of a table with scores that's going to help us do the fairness assessment. And so that's more or less what I was required to do to access our first requirement, that really, if we want to evaluate the level of fairness, then we need to be able to say, well, to score the each resources based on a certain score, based on a certain numbers of credit that we will assign based on what? Based on criteria, on questions, but also based on the importance that those approach that we have identified have given to each of the principles. So what we found out is each FAIR principles, the 15s, were not necessarily always equal in people's minds. So if you look at SHARC, the fairness evaluation approach SHARC, then you already, or even FDMM in blue, you'll see that there are already differences between F1 and F2, F1 taking more importance than F2 in the process of evaluating the level of fairness. And we did the same, so with generic approach, specific approach, and integrated that into a general grid that give us something like 478 credits that were dispatched on the 15 FAIR principles. So you see that for FAIR principle F1, for example, we took a baseline of 10. We have 20 points that will come from the non-specific approach, 11 points that will come from the specific approach. And then we will say, okay, for FAIR principle F1, we will have 41 points to dispatch on the questions, on the criteria that we will have for F1. But that numbers of credits will stay the same, whatever the question. So in the future, if we decide to change the questions, then the grid will stay the same. And so that such a grid will help us to kind of identify, am I fair? I mean, what is it being fair? Is that above a certain threshold, a certain score? And even above a certain score, are you even more than fairer? And so the fact of having a score put us in that situation of trying to say, look, fair is probably around that state. We have a little formula that we explain in one paper where we present the grid, where we said, look, if you're in that space, maybe you can consider you're fair. And under, you will not consider you're fair. So we knew that we would have so much things to say with respect to ontologies, and those information related to ontologies will need to be used for FAIR. So a big relation, information about people developing an ontology, the relation between those ontologies, where is the content, what's the communities, which dates the resource have been produced, modified, released, validated, which date is not available anymore, things like that. So we have a lot of things to say to the related to ontologies, and we're going to need somewhere a place to actually harmonize that. And we're going to have our philosophy was to start thinking that we're going to use that information to actually address those questions that we have, or those criteria that we're going to have. So in order to decide how to assign those points, we had to implement a methodology that will say, look, for semantic artifacts, that's what it means to be fair, to be F1, to be F2, or to be F3, etc. So we end up with 61 questions that for us are the result of the projection of the FAIR principle to semantic artifact, and 45 of these questions are really dependent of the semantic resource, and others 16 are even independent of the ontology or the semantic artifact or resource. They are actually dependent of the fact that you share them directly, for example, on the ontology repository. So 3 examples of those questions. For example, the question 2 of FAIR principle 4, findable 4, is the ontology register in multiple open ontology repositories. And for these, we said, okay, over the bunch of credits that we have, we'll assign 10 credits for that. Are the ontology metadata of each version available, which is a point that is also clearly identified by the FAIR principle? And if they are, and you can prove that they are, you will have, for example, 5 credits. Is the ontology license clearly specified with a URI that is resolvable, not only a sentence, but a URI on which you can build software? Then you will have 15 points for this one, which is also considered a very important principle. So we did that, produce some kind of a method. So all the questions are available on our GitHub repository, but also on the reference paper that I will mention after. And we then compute some kind of a method that for each question you have a score, for each question packaged into a sub-principle you have a score, which is the sum, and then you end up to have a fair score, which is the sum of all those 15 fair sub-principle score. And if you go online, you'll find all of our assessment questions. So here are the 4 ones that we have for for F1, here are the 3 ones that we have for the 24 credits for fair principle F4. Here are the ones related to fair assessment, the question A 1.1. So sorry if you're not super familiar with the fair principle, but those are really the fair principle identifiers. And so you see, for example, that those one is the ontology relying on an HTTP or URIs for identification and access mechanism. Those questions are like really technical. And those questions will rely very much on the ontology repository to tell us that. So if you will deposit your ontology, for example, in AgroPortal, then no problem. You have your ontology accessible through HTTP, and HTTP will be a protocol that is open, free, and universally implementable. Okay, you get all these points. So yeah, you'll see the list of questions there, and they are being presented in this paper that I give the citation a little later. So our third requirement was to be, now that we know that we'll have questions, we need to be able to evaluate those questions somewhere, and we need the metadata being describing the ontologies we need them harmonized somewhere. Well, harmonized first, and somewhere we'll see where it goes. That's the requirement number 4. So for these, we came back to some work that we did in the context of Research Data Alliance, but also different groups working on ontology metadata, where we took multiple metadata vocabularies and also approach implemented in ontology repositories, look at the metadata record of the ontologies inside there, and try to elicitate the properties that people will use to actually describe the metadata. You remember the slide? We have so much things to say about an ontology, but how do you say that? And so the objective of this work was to build something that we call MOD, some kind of a vocabulary to describe ontologies and vocabularies, that there is a meta level here. And in MOD, we capture 346 relevant properties that we identified will be useful to describe ontologies. And we said, over those 346, we map them, we look at the ones that are the same, and we end up with a model of 127 metadata properties. And that became the MOD 1.4 specification. And we were even capable of, separating the one between cores and extra metadata properties. And for us, the work on MOD was super useful because it provided us a format for actually picking up inside the ontologies the metadata that we will require to evaluate the level of fairness. So MOD was version 1.4 was published in 2018, and we're still working in these in the context of the European project called Fair Impact, in which we are trying to consolidate that now and make that really compliant with the DCAT W3C recommendation. And so all of those vocabularies are like so much things that there are many vocabularies that we took to build that. Those vocabularies sometimes will be used inside an ontology. So for those of you that are familiar here, what I'm describing is the very beginning of an ontology file, OWL file, where you see that the object is an OWL ontology and it's called SIO. The semantic semantic science integrated ontology. We have a description. All of those are metadata properties described in the ontology file that we would like to be, that will come from those vocabularies that MOD was providing us the tools to actually extract and find inside the diversity of ontologies that we have in whatever portal. In AgroPortal, we have 158 ontologies, and each of them are described with them. So we end up thinking, fair, using or relying on 80% of it on metadata that will be specific to the ontologies. And all of those are metadata you will find with properties that you will find in those vocabularies. This is the review we did in MOD. And so the final requirement was really, now that we have MOD somewhere, we need, we need a place where MOD is implemented and that metadata related to ontologies is actually harmonized and eventually also curated. And AgroPortal was for us the ideal place for that. Really, AgroPortal offers a unified model based on MOD for every some ontologies that are there, and we curate them. So that's all of that vision was expressed in a paper called Harnessing the Power of a Unified Metadata in an Ontology Repository, where we presented AgroPortal with that argument of by unifying the metadata model, you will do a lot of things. You will tell a lot of things, and including make ontology more fair. That was pointed in that paper written early 2017. So the description of ontologies with metadata is done in AgroPortal and curated also by our team, and with the users deposit their ontologies. And we try to do that in a semantic way approach, where we try to have the values of the metadata being reused or usable by machine. For example, we like to have instead of have the string CCBI, we want to have the URI as describing CCBI in order for the machine to be able to actually process that. And so all of that metadata is harmonized and synchronized in AgroPortal. It was giving us really the four requirements. I'm just passing on that slide that is presenting how we can describe the landscape of ontologies when we look at the metadata being described for ontologies like that. So, but the key aspect is that we have a very rich model harmonized in AgroPortal for metadata. So all of that being taken into account help us to develop what we call now OFAIR, the Ontology Fairness Evaluator, which is first a methodology which uses as much as possible metadata values to answer those questions. And I will tell you if an ontology respects those questions, then that points are available. But then we implemented almost, let's say 85% of that methodology inside AgroPortal. There is some question that we haven't yet implemented in the current version. So it's also a tool that is available as a web service that you can say, oh, this is my ontology in AgroPortal, give me the fair score for that. And the UI that you see here is actually showing you that's what we have on the welcome page on AgroPortal, showing you the fair score of all of the resources in AgroPortal. So the demo is more or less done with those 3 slides, where we show that AgroPortal will give you the level of fairness for a given ontology. You see on the left, for example, we'll have an ontology that have 340 phone credits that give us a normalized score of 71%. And you see we have that figures showing you that the gray are the scores that are obtained by the ontology, the yellow are the scores that are not really obtained, and you see in gray are the scores that the ontology cannot obtain right now because we haven't implemented yet those questions related to that. And so because we know all of that, we are doing all of that to explain and help users implement and enhance the level of fairness of the ontologies. We are providing them a lot of explanation on why OFAIR as judge or as accredited given this point. So if you go to the details tab, you'll see the fairness assessment questions described one by one and with the response that we found for a certain ontology. And in another page called the landscape page on AgroPortal, you will even be able to find the fairness score for a group of ontologies, where we'll compute the mean, the max, the average, which is super useful for groups developing multiple ontologies and want to assess or work or see exactly the set of ontologies, how much they are following the FAIR principle. So this is the same screenshot, but a little zoom showing you also the score, the normalized score. And if you click on that little JSON button, you'll call the web service yourself and see the JSON data that the UI used to display the results. So it means that somewhere also another tool than AgroPortal can actually plug to OFAIR and show the results inside another. For each question, the explanation helps you to say, show me the credits. For example, if you have on the question, does the ontology have a local identifier that is globally unique and potentially permanent identifier assigned by the developer? If you do have that we call a URI, then you'll have the point. And if the URI is valid, then you'll have even more points on that. And the property that we check for that is the property called OWL ontology URI. And we inform the user that we look into this property to assign the points. And yeah, as I said, in the backend, you have a web service doing that. So in summary, and I'm always getting at the end of the presentation here, but in summary, OFAIR has been developed as a tool to help evaluate the level of fairness, to which level of resource, semantic resource in AgroPortal respect the FAIR principles. And we see that as a tool, we call it evaluator, but now there are more and more challenges in the communities an expression about the idea that we should provide assistance toward FAIR, and we believe also OFAIR is also helping to assist developers in addressing the FAIR principle for their resource. This is a web service that is accessible somewhere on the machine, on the AgroPortal machine, but that is also available in the UI of AgroPortal as you see it. We're already on the version 2 of it because we did patch some change right after the first release, and that makes the second release with the 61 question. And we can get the score of an ontology or group of ontologies, and you'll have all of the detail that is open source somewhere. OFAIR is implemented as in a Java web service that you can actually call and will consume the metadata from AgroPortal. But because we consume the metadata from AgroPortal, we've been able to deploy OFAIR in multiple portals of the Alliance. So this part of the slide is super new. 2 weeks ago, we released the OFAIR in a bunch of new portals. So if someone goes to another group, another ontology repository in the Alliance that follow the same MOD-based metadata model, you'll get OFAIR also included in those portals. Those are the publications. The main publication is the one in the middle, the one at the very beginning, presenting in the International Journal of Metadata, Semantics and Ontologies, presenting all of the question and the methodology. It's a quite big paper, presenting all of the details of each of the questions, etc. of OFAIR. The second one is really a demonstration paper presenting presenting OFAIR inside AgroPortal, a little bit like the UIs that I'm presented. In summary, we argue on the fact that in order to have FAIR data, we need FAIR ontologies, that we argue on the fact that developing ontology repositories help make ontology fair, but we wanted to evaluate the level of fairness. That's what we did with OFAIR. I've introduced or presented a few things related to AgroPortal at the beginning of the talk, and then in detail OFAIR. And I just mentioned here that we do that in the context of at least 3 projects. The D2CAP National Research Agency founded project. It's a project called Data to Knowledge in Agronomy and Biodiversity. And it's a project in which we develop AgroPortal and others, knowledge graph and services around semantic for agronomy and biodiversity. The ONTOPortal Alliance, on which I said a word, and the Fair Impact Project, which is also a project in the roadmap of the European Open Science Cloud, in which the FAIR principles are super important, and we want to demonstrate in Fair Impact that we can apply the FAIR principle to other kind of research object, not only data set and semantic artifacts. Ontologies are for us one of the objects on which we apply the FAIR principle. On this is the end for me, and I will take questions. I hope I was not too long and we still have time for questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Clement. Merci. It was a great presentation. Lots of resources. So there are already people asking for your slides, so I hope you can share them with us. I myself, I tried to get a screenshot of one of your references, but it was too late and couldn't do it. So I
made the slide available for sure. We'll do that right after if you want, and I'll share it with you or Milena with pleasure. Those slides, there are different versions of those slides a little bit available, but I will make those ones that I've packaged in a certain approach for presenting AgroPortal and OFAIR available. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much, and congratulations for all your work and of your colleagues. And we are going to take questions from the audience, but before that, I wanted to ask you if the unified data metadata that you mentioned is the application of the MODI itself. So that's what you are doing. You are unifying using this proposal, or not exactly? So
a short answer and the politically correct answer will be yes. This is we have in AgroPortal the MOD model. Another a little bit more detailed answer, but without not going into much detail, we did all this work in parallel, but the motivation was for us to do that in AgroPortal. But if we would do this job for AgroPortal, my motivation was also to be sure that it will benefit others outside of AgroPortal also. And so we did in parallel the effort of trying to standardize some kind of a vocabulary to describe metadata, and then in parallel a technical evolution of AgroPortal to ingest and align with that new metadata model. So because of that parallel and that backward compatibility of AgroPortal with what was there before, there are a few properties that are in AgroPortal that do not necessarily always align, always the same one that MOD suggests, but we can say that AgroPortal support MOD because it can export you an MOD compliant metadata record.
Okay, it's always not so simple, I guess, things like that. So I would have lots of other questions, but let's allow the audience to also interact. So I see Leandro has a question here in the chat box, actually two. Is the requirements completed online in AgroPortal itself? I think Clement showed that it's everything in GitHub, if I'm correct. And what about the ontology data itself? Can they be sent via JSON or SCOF?
Okay, so yeah, we do have a question related to metadata and the record we have for that in AgroPortal. I'm not sure what you mean exactly here by the requirements, but let's say well,
sorry.
The key idea is that yes, the metadata record is edited on AgroPortal, so someone can log in. I mean, someone with authorship on a resource, and then edit that metadata record. And the fact of editing and enhancing, curating the metadata will have an impact, a direct impact on the fairness score. And that metadata record lives on AgroPortal. But I passed on it very, very fast, but we have also that mechanism where we said, oh, if you have work on that metadata record and you want to get the metadata and put it back in your ontology file. So if you give the ontology file to someone else, then you can actually click a button that we have on AgroPortal called Get My Metadata Back that will actually give you that metadata that we store in AgroPortal for you and give it back to you so you can put it in your file, and then other portals, other tools that will be using your file later will have it. And so yes, we can edit them really directly in the portal. And the data itself, so I will assume that what about means also that there is a link with the connection with that notion of completion online, etc. So we'll say that first, AgroPortal is not a place where we edit the ontologies. We really offer a place to browse them, search them, use them once they are edited and make available by their developers. But we can facilitate the creation of new terms, or we can message to the developers of the ontology notes and comments and suggestion of new terms in order for them to prepare on their side the new version of the ontology and then eventually go back to AgroPortal and put the new version in. So we see our role not as an editor of ontology. We let that to Protégé, Workbench, and those tools that are doing that better than us. But so we don't edit. But can they be sent via JSON or SCOF? We will take a file and upload that file and parse that file, but then also make the file that we have uploaded to make the content of the ontology available. That file will itself be available. So you can access all of the content of the ontology in the source file that was provided by the ontology developer, and in another RDF XML file that we compute on our side, but not JSON, because JSON is not a format that you can use to actually represent an ontology or semantic artifact. JSON is not powerful enough to do that. If you want to represent RDF in JSON, you have to use another language called JSON-LD, for which we don't provide an automatic export for the data, the content of the ontology. We provide an export of the metadata in JSON-LD.
Yeah, I think there are tools also that help converting to OWL and other formats available out there. Well, there is a question from Antonio Ramos here. I'm a library science grad student and I have a research scholarship in open science. So I'm quite familiarized with it, but can't see how it impacts the agro, in particular in the field, in the action. How agronomy benefits from open data? It's more a research related benefit for researchers, or it affects farmers, agriculture directly as well? Yeah. Also, that's a philosophical question. Also, you were being introduced, you said you are specialized in IT. How do you connect both worlds, and what's your biggest challenge in doing it?
That's a good question, Antonio. This is right. Not fair. Sorry, but far beyond the topic of the seminar or the conference today. Of course, all of that is assuming our public, our community has accepted the idea that opening data in the scientific domain in agri-food will actually pay back somehow, either for the scientists, but also eventually for the actors, farmers, and agriculture, or people wherever they are on the chain. So we expect that open science will facilitate, innovation, research, but also will actually also open new ways of eventually payback also to the farmers. Or so I'm not going to demonstrate that in my talk or even in my response today, but this is part of that vision that we are not addressing only at the level of agri-food here, that we believe, or EOSC, for example, Fair Impact, come to Fair Impact to see people interacting at that level of why we do open science, why we do open data, why we do fair data, because we believe it can actually trigger new innovations, new visions, and new possibilities for public and private actors on that, relying on data being the new gold a little bit. So assuming you will accept that from wherever source that will influence and convince you on that, then you will make it to a point where that data needs to be interoperable. And if that data needs to be interoperable to achieve that vision, then eventually you will make it to a point that data needs to rely or connect or be indexed with standard semantic artifact, ontologies, and vocabularies. And then eventually you make it to AgroPortal have a certain sense because it actually helps people share those vocabularies that will be useful to index data, that will be useful to make them data open and fair, that will be useful to create that innovation that will eventually benefit the farmer. But we are really part of, a chain somewhere.
Yeah, thank you very much. There is another question here from Luana Salles, who is the coordinator of GoFair Brazil. Thank you for your amazing presentation. I have a question. Why don't you choose to work with the SCOS data model to describe the concepts?
Okay, so that's a good question, and I will assume this is from a person that have been either very attentive to the slideshow that I presented, or that have been browsing AgroPortal online to kind of see that we are not directly using the SCOS data model to describe concepts. So let me explain a little bit that. SCOS, first, BioPortal was invented 3-4 years before SCOS became a standard, W3C standard. And still, with that, we end up being super close in our internal data model to describe concept, very super close from SCOS, the SCOS one. So we provide for every concept or classes in the portal a preferred name, synonyms, a certain hierarchy, a definition, and a few annotation on them that are custom, that are either specific or not, but that notion of notation also. So we were super close of the SCOS model, but it's true that it's not the SCOS model that has been intrinsically built in AgroPortal or even in BioPortal historically. And also we have to also consider that that diversity originally came from, today it might sound obvious, and especially in the agri-food domain, to say we should be compliant with SCOS from scratch and in all of the software that we write. But think about the communities that have adopted that came before SCOS, or that are even now behind SCOS in terms of the knowledge they want to represent. And I'm thinking here in the biomedical domain, but in other communities in biology or others, they have already, they don't use SCOS because two reasons. SCOS was not necessarily there in the past when they start developing ontologies, but also because SCOS does not enable to capture all of the knowledge they want to have with respect to the concept and the classes they want to define. So BioPortal was also flexible enough in the originally to be a little bit more related to OWL originally, and which also makes it difficult to make it more compliant with SCOS in the past. Now we are fully compliant with SCOS, but it was also a good idea in order to not prevent or block communities into a formal model course that will eventually be not enough to represent knowledge, and for which the new approach will be necessary. So I hope I answered the question. But so living with SCOS was a real history also in building bioportal and agroportal.
Thank you, Clement. I also have another question. When you presented the example of the leaf area index concept, so this is a variable that's collected not only inside the agronomy discipline, but in ecology and others. How in this ontoportal ecosystem, how do you deal with those concepts that are relevant to different disciplines or communities? You have them repeated, or there is some connection?
I would say there are several elements here. So we don't put ourselves also in place of the scientists that actually are the appropriate person, you know, the agronomist developing or studying the crops that will tell us, oh, leaf area index is actually this and this, and in my community it means this. So we don't put ourselves in a place where we gather the knowledge for everyone, or try to mix that, or even be the one deciding what's the good version or what's the good thing. What the position we put ourselves in is, let's show that diversity to the persons having the knowledge or having the expertise, and then put them in front of the fact that leaf area index could actually mean something in certain ontology and another one. So and by doing the portal, by showing that we can actually index the content, and leaf area index with different meaning can actually go back from the search, is supposed to facilitate that process of then enabling or allowing the scientific communities to identify which are the concepts that are more related to that. So there are two dimensions to that. We technically, so that's the global dimension, to say we don't do actually anything. We leave the science happens, and we try to facilitate or build software to enable that science to happen. At the technical level, to answer also with a little more technical aspect, you see that we try to identify when the label for certain terms inside a multiple ontology is the same, and for us it becomes what we call a lexical match. I'm not crazy about the term mapping there, but by showing those lexical match, we think the value added for a user developing a new ontology and uploading that to agroportal, like an hour after, when the ontology is parsed and available in the portal, the person will already have a coverage, a lexical coverage with all of the other ontologies that we have inside the portal, that will tell him or her those are the terms that we already have, the labels that we already have, for which there is potential match. And maybe leaf area index will actually be in there, and it's your job as an ontology editor now to potentially decide if you position yourself with respect to that by doing a same as, like a mapping, a formal mapping between them, or if you decide that you'll erase your own ontology URI or your own URI for that concept and then start reusing the other, etc., etc. So we believe that by creating agroportal, we create that ecosystem in which those discussions can happen.
Clement, just because it's I think it's in the same area, in the same field. I was thinking about the relations, because, for example, AgroVoc uses agroontology, and all the other ontologies can use other resources of relations between terms. So it's the same thing. You deal with it in the same way you said now about the concepts.
Alors, yeah. Alors,
that's a problem.
That's a French word. So I would say yes and no. We have two levels here. That connection between semantic artifact will happen by looking at the content of those semantic artifacts, and then we'll be able to create those mappings. And eventually, we hope that one day we'll connect with like state-of-the-art ontology alignment tool that goes beyond the lexical match and we'll do some fancy mappings. But we also store, so that's the concept level that we can detect, but we also store at the metadata level of the ontology relation between ontologies that the curator or the ontology developer can assert, so declare. So if there is a relation between agrovoc and another one, and we don't find it inside the file, or we don't parse the file to actually be aware of that or discover it, then the curator or the ontology developer can tell us, I have a metadata a relation that I will store in my metadata with that ontology. And then the portal can actually use that to say, well, I can tell you the numbers of terms that are reused in agrovoc from another ontology, but I can tell you that there is a relation of reuse between those two terms. And that metadata, and we have 12 properties to describe those relationships between the ontologies. And so we have a page called the landscape page that there was a slide on it, but I moved on it very fast, where we are able to see also illustrate the network of around an ontology that will tell you, oh, and if we'll have soon that on the next AgroPortal release, we'll have that directly on the page of the ontology. And then we take the agrovoc example very often, where we see from agrovoc all of the resources that are directly connected to agrovoc based on the metadata declaration.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Maria. I would like to know in more detail, if it's possible, about the annotation process. Is it based on linguistic corpus?
Okay, so this is making a reference to the service that I presented called the annotator. And the annotator is actually really a service that takes some text, and inside that text will identify ontology terms being defined in ontologies. And the question is, so the process, the actual process, I'm going to answer the two aspects of the question. We don't rely on a linguistic corpus here, and we don't use, I would say, some kind of a modern large language model, or even deep learning based model that would be based on a corpus of data trained, and then eventually a tool that is able to detect it. The reason for that is that we implemented originally a dictionary approach. One of the historical reasons for that was we wanted someone will drop an ontology in the portal, then the annotator will become available for that ontology. So we'll take the content of the ontology and build that in a dictionary, and we do use what we call in the domain a dictionary-based approach. And so if we have a terms that exist inside an ontology, a label or a synonym, we'll put that in our dictionary, and our concept mapper that is doing some kind of very efficient lexical match will find those terms inside the text and tell us, oh, I find that term here. So it probably means that I have an annotation with this concept that I can look up in my index, and then tell you about the annotation. But what the annotator is also doing is that if I found a term, for example, if I found the word, let's say, I remember the example with melanoma that I was using all the time when I was working on that on BioPortal. If I found the term melanoma in the text, and the ontology tells me that melanoma is a cancer and cancer is the disease, then I can also send you back an annotation with the word cancer, or the word neoplasm, which is a synonym of cancer, even if the term cancer is not in any text, in the text that you have given me in the annotator. So as a user, then you can get those annotations back and then index your data with cancer, even if the string cancer is not in the text. And so if someone later comes with the string cancer and say, what do you have for cancer? You can get it back to the person, the text that actually contained melanoma, because the fact of using the annotator has helped you use the semantic of the ontologies. I hope you answer your question, Maria Carolina.
Regarding Maria's questions, do you see any use of language learning models in AgroPortal?
I think it's large language model.
A large language model, sorry.
Yes, this is a topic that comes out on the table now that the LLMs are being more and more used and famous. we're going to have to reopen, I would say, a research and development box for that. The annotator as it is does not answer this need. We know now that we can have trained model on corpus of data, to go back to Maria's question. And once those models have been trained, they are easy to retrain with the ontology content. But you keep in mind that what we want is not something that is frozen, or for which we have 20 ontologies. We do something and then we make it available as the annotator. We want something like ready for those 20 ontologies, but the day after we're going to have 22 ontologies, and then the day after we're going to have 5 of those 22 ontologies that have been updated and that are new. And so we need something that need to be like the technical aspect of it is also very important. We already had students that have developed those POC, proof of concept tools, where we'll take the dictionary that we have, a corpus-based approach, and demonstrate that we can get even better results that the one we have with the annotator right now. But moving from the POC to the service in production that will be like out of the box and also at the click of the mouse work when someone uploads an ontology, it's not that trivial. And if I go to the question of Rita, also related to OntoPortal, so I'm not sure where you went, Rita, but OntoPortal, the website, is really a website presenting the technology. And so if you go to OntoPortal, there is no portal in OntoPortal. I mean, there is a demo portal that we call Demo Portal, but the OntoPortal is not a portal. OntoPortal is the technology that we use to deploy AgroPortal, BioPortal, MathPortal. And so yeah, if you actually go to one of our portal, for example, AgroPortal or BioPortal, you don't need an account to see all of the ontologies that are there. You will see only the ones that are deposited by their users and free of access. But we do have a mechanism also in the portal to store ontologies and declare them as private ontologies. So if someone wants to use the features of the portal but without making their ontologies available to the rest of the world, they can do that too. And the second part of the question, why do the portal need user data to deliver ontology? To deliver ontology information, the biggest problem of working with ontologies is that this is very hard to reuse and find useful ontologies. So, well, let me focus on the second part of your question here. Indeed, we share the same point of view, that the biggest problem is really finding the one that is useful and that is relevant for a certain task. So that's why we believe that we have to provide several services: the browse interface that helps you select, the recommender that I quickly mentioned that for certain piece of text will help you identify the ontologies that are relevant, but also the metadata description. We believe that by describing with the maximum number of metadata, we do provide to the final users the element to actually help them in making the selection choice. But we can put ourselves in a position, we are not, I mean, some people, for example, some community developing ontologies, I can refer, for example, the Obo Foundry people are developing ontologies following certain standard. And if you ask them for an ontology to describe human disease, they will tell us, we do have one, it's called human disease ontology, and you should use that. We don't have such an editorial line in AgroPortal. We have a line that is more flexible, where we can even say that our editorial line is, we take things that are related to agri-food, but we leave the judgment to decide if that ontology good, not good, appropriate for my task or not, etc., to the final users by providing them as much information as we can to do that. And that part of that information is, for example, the fairness assessment score that I've presented.
Hello, Jonquet. I'm Leandro. Thank your talk about the use of large language models, and I think that we do one thing. First, we do a hard train model with data of ontologies of today. And after, in new versions, we need to do a fine tuning of model.
Yeah, I hear your point. Is that a question, Leandro, or do you see what I mean? I mean, when you say we do, what do you mean by we do?
Fecho.
Está muda, Milena.
Yes, Jonquet, I will repeat. For the use of large language modules, you saw that it's difficult. It's difficult because we have many trainings of each version of ontologies. Okay,
Mhm.
but I do anything. In the first time, we train a hard train of the version of ontologies today. And after, to update the model, we can do fine tuning of ontologies in the same model. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I understand
What to
your.
think about it?
Yeah, thanks for finishing the remark with a question. Now I understand what you mean. So originally I understood that you guys were developing something. Well, the philosophy that we will have is exactly the one you described. We'll have a pre-trained model that will be trained on a large corpus of agri-food related data, probably in English in the first time. That model even can be based on a more general model like the ChatGPTs and things like that. And then we can do that fine tuning with based on the ontology content afterward. First, with the content of the ontologies that we have originally, and then on the refresh mode. That will be the philosophy we'll follow. And still, we don't have the software, the architecture right now to actually build that in. So that's why I said we're gonna need another research project to do that, because it's something in which we need to set up an architecture, set up a new system, and then start building on that. But we also know that the day we're gonna do that, train a large language model on our ontologies, we're not gonna limit ourselves also to annotation, like annotation of text. That was our original use case. That will still be a use case in the future. But if you end up giving me something as powerful as ChatGPT, for example, on the content of the ontologies, then we'll probably also invent new services and new way of using ontologies based on that, including question and answers on ontologies, creating links between the ontologies. I mean, there is a paper coming soon about the fact of using a large language model for generating those mappings between ontologies. So we'll definitely reuse that. That will be a big structural change for us there.
Thank you very much, Clement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leandro, for the question. We are a little bit over the time here, so I really believe we could stay longer, but I don't want to keep Clement so much longer than what we agreed originally. So I think we can end our conversation, and I would like to thank Clement very much for your time and willingness to present to our community here. I think everybody enjoyed it very much. I need to acknowledge and thank Institutos de Estudos Avançados da Universidade de São Paulo for hosting our webinar today, and also for promoting it. And I will give it the floor to Milena to end our conversation, and then maybe to Clement to final words. Thanks.
Hey, I just say thank you also. Thank you very much. It was very, very good. It's also always something that makes us think about lots of things, and I hope we'll have the opportunity to continue talking. Thank you everyone for watching, and give back to you, Clement, for final words.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me in the network here. So I think it's also a way to discover the existence of the network, and discover works on both sides of the sea. So for sure, if you have questions and ways of continue interacting, I make myself available. So feel free, even beyond the seminar. And it will be nice also to see also the efforts of the Brazilian community in the agri-food domain, or even beyond, in other ontoportal instance, producing semantic artifacts and ontologies being also represented in the portals that we develop, either AgroPortal or others. So I will be also very happy to to push you in sharing and making your ontologies available in those resources, and collaborate on those aspects. Yeah. So thanks for having me again, and I'll be happy to stay in touch.
You
Thank you.
stop recording.